Hey folks, before we get to the episode, I want to invite you to this month's International Directors Meetup, our monthly gathering of directors and theater makers from around the world. It's a space to share experiences, trade advice, and find support in what can often be a pretty isolating role. You can come and go as you need, drop in late, leave early, whatever fits your schedule. It's simply a chance to set aside time each month to sit alongside others who understand the work. For dates, times, and details, head to boardofdirectors.world and pull up a chair at the table. Join the board. Sometimes you sit down with someone for the first time, and within minutes, it feels less like an interview and more like an ongoing conversation you somehow stepped into midway through. That was my experience with Bill Rauch. I'd known Bill's work for years, long before we ever met. First, through his groundbreaking leadership at Cornerstone Theater Company, where he helped redefine what community-engaged theater could look like in America. His work has always asked a bigger question than simply how to make a production. It asks who theater is for, who gets invited into the room, and how inclusion itself becomes an artistic practice. What struck me most in this conversation was his generosity, not just with stories or ideas, but with curiosity. There was no distance, no hierarchy. He met me immediately as a fellow traveler, someone equally interested in the questions of directing, leadership, and how we build communities through art. We talk about inclusion, about redefining excellence, about the courage required to lead with values inside large institutions, and about the tension between rigor and accessibility. We talk about process, about uncertainty, and about what it means to make theater that doesn't simply entertain, but has the possibility of changing how we live alongside one another. At one point after we finished recording, Bill said this was one of the richest and most meaningful conversations he'd had with someone he had just met. I felt exactly the same. This is my conversation with Bill Rauch. Bill, thank you for joining me. As I've said to you before, I have known about your work for the longest time. I have a very distinct memory of being on the bus in high school, reading the physical copy of American Theater magazine about Cornerstone Theater. So we can tell how old that is, of the physical copy of American Theater magazine on a high school bus. But I remember reading about the work that you were doing in LA and how, for me at that time, young high school student, how radical that seemed. You've consistently chosen to make work that includes rather than excludes. Where does that impulse come from?
Let me just say, first of all, Adam, I'm so delighted to be talking with you. And thanks for inviting me to have a conversation.
My pleasure. Really my pleasure.
I think the impulse to include comes from a lot of personal things. I think as a gay man growing up in this world, in this country, that's part of it. I have a brother who's deaf and has cerebral palsy. My parents were very inclusive people. We often had people staying with us, people who maybe needed some help. And I don't know, it's just the world is so much more interesting if you include people who are not like yourself as well as the people who are like you. And so that's been, I do think it's been a real driving force in a lot of what I've tried to do throughout my life.
What does it... I'm going to ask this question, and I also know the intrinsic kind of negativity that this question seems to have, but I don't mean it this way. What does it cost you artistically or even institutionally to work that way and to have that drive to work that way when maybe the industry in a lot of places or institutions don't want to work that way?
What an interesting question. Wow. My immediate response is that, what it costs is that sometimes the field is not set up to think of inclusion as the way to move. And I would also say working in communities that you are not a member of, working with communities that you're not a member of, has its own challenges, in terms of what the heck am I doing in X neighborhood or X community? And so believing in the work and believing in the integrity of the process, that there are people who are members of the community who are at the absolute center of what we're making, and that it's okay for me as a guest in that community to be part of a project. Wrestling with that, I think, costs something.
Mm. And I know the origin stories of Cornerstone. I know the work in Virginia and North Dakota. I don't know pre-Cornerstone Bill Rauch, though. Were you were making theater at that point? You were already interested in this thing, and then this idea of a radical inclusion that was already a part of your life. Can you talk a little bit about when there was a moment when shifted from something that you did to something that you needed to do?
Beautiful question. Well, I would say, first of all, that I think, like, for so many of us in this field, theater just felt essential. It just felt like the air I needed to breathe from early in elementary school. I acted, but I also experimented a little bit with directing, even in middle school. I had adapted. Our class was reading A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was frustrated with all the arrogance of a seventh grader. I was frustrated that the language was too difficult for my classmates to understand. So I decided to adapt it, and I rewrote A Midsummer Night's Dream. And then my English teacher asked me if I'd like to direct it with the following year, my version with that year's crop of seventh graders. So that was my first time directing. I directed a little bit in high school as well, a couple things that I wrote. And then I thought I still wanted to be an actor. I got to college. I directed my first full-length play when I was a freshman, and it was very, very clear to me at that point, like crystal clear, like a light switch had been switched on. You're a director. You're not an actor. You have anything to offer the world, it might be as a director. And so I just... I would say that need to direct kicked in right then. And I directed over the course of my 4 years in college. I directed 26 projects, believe it or not. That included summers of summer theater on campus, as well as the academic years. But, that was it. That was my love. That was my passion. I was so hungry to learn by doing. I had an incredible mentor in college, a woman named Joanne Breuer, who taught me so much, but I learned so much from my peers. I just loved it. I loved it. And I still do. I love it just as much today as I did when I was 18.
Well, you said a word that I was going to bring up, which is hungry. And you seem still to this day hungry, not in a capitalistic rapacious way, but like actually like feeling the need to satiate, like, oh, I still want that thing. I feel that with every project that you do and where you go in your career. Is there a question that you were trying to answer when you first started making theater that you're still asking today, that you're still trying to answer today?
Absolutely. And again, sorry, I keep taking a moment to compliment your questions, but beautiful, beautiful question. I think that question is, can I be part of theater projects that are artistically adventurous, ambitious, that are breaking new ground, that bring people together from as many different walks of life as possible? I cared about that when I was 18, and I care about that now.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I teach university here, and one of the things that I really kind of drill into the students is their why. They're kind of Simon Sinek, why do I do this thing? And it's one of the things where I've realized that a lot of people aren't ever asked that question, why do you do this thing? I was really good at it. I did this in high school, and my parents have been pushing me this entire time. But to really get them in the point where they kind of have to be asked that question, they reevaluate that. And what you've just brought up is very similar to what a lot of them get to, is a feeling that they've not been able to express or articulate. The same for myself. I create communities so that empathy can be expressed. That's every project that I do.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So I love that. Your work with Cornerstone really redefined what theater could be in relationship to a community. What did you discover there that you couldn't have learned anywhere else?
To have the courage to get to know and to collaborate with the people that you're most afraid of.
Can you go further into that? Can you explain what do you mean by that?
Well, first of all, I want to say about Cornerstone that Cornerstone was co-founded by myself and a brilliant woman named Allison Carey, who's a playwright, and dramaturg, and a climate activist, and an extraordinary human being. And there were 11 of us who were founding members when we started. So Cornerstone has always been, and still is, it's turning 40 in June this year. And it's always been a collective effort, a deeply collaborative effort. So I'm happy to dig in and talk about Cornerstone, but I just want to frame that very clearly. That
of course.
I've been lucky to be. I was lucky to be part of Cornerstone for 20 years, and to learn from it and be shaped by it. But it was always in collaboration, both with my professional colleagues and with the communities we were working with. Yeah, the beautiful thing about Cornerstone's work is that it constantly reinforces that every single human being is an artist, whether they've had the opportunity to express it or not, and that every single human being is just a mass of contradictions and, has a beautiful spirit to offer, in the right environment and the right collaboration. And I just feel like that's what Cornerstone taught me again and again and again. I fantasize about doing a Cornerstone project. I mean, in a way, they're all Cornerstone projects since the year since I've left Cornerstone, but doing actually a project with Cornerstone Theater Company again someday.
Well, it'll happen. I'm sure it's going to happen. There's no doubt about that.
From your lips, to say.
Yeah. I had on.
I've never said that out loud in a public setting, though. By the way, so
here we go. So now you've put it into the universe.
Yes.
There it is. I had on Brian Dories from Theater of War Productions recently on the podcast, and we were talking about. I mean, obviously, he's working with some of the finest actors on the planet, and now incorporating public figures. They've got a production soon with Dr. Anthony Fauci and Zoran Mamdani. So there's that, but he said all of that is a beautiful thing of centralizing the event for the actual conversation, which is with the community. The dialogue that afterwards is the real thing. Is excellence different in a community-based context? Do you have to redefine what excellence is? I mean, I'm thinking the industry at large, or these things that we have of awards and all that, they are focused on the professionalism of things. And excellence is measured in that respect. But when you're working with a community setting, does excellence have to be redefined? Yeah. Yes
to that question. Not yes to the answer, but yes to asking that question. Let me just say about Brian briefly that I am such a big fan, and I was so proud an early Theater of War iteration happened at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival.
Yeah.
When I was first there as artistic director, I feel like that question, the kind of false binary between excellence and inclusion, between excellence and community participation. I feel like I've been in that kind of soup for 40 years. And any time, the idea that there's such a thing as objective excellence is ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's excellence in so many, there's so many facets of excellence. And so it's a very personal and very political stance that you take when you define excellence. I remember early in Cornerstone's life, Allison and I were sitting in an office of somebody at the National Endowment for the Arts. And this individual said, look me in the eye. Look me in the eye. Nothing that involves amateurs will ever be of national excellence. And you will never receive a dime of federal taxpayer money because what you do is not of excellence. So it's been a long dialogue. And needless to say, I think, excellence, the integrity of process, authenticity of community expression, excellence of how people have grown through the process. And sure, how was the piece entertaining? How did the piece open up new ways of thinking? Did the piece move you on an emotional level? Did it touch your heart? I mean, you and I could both go on and on riffing different facets of excellence. But the false binary between excellence and inclusion, I categorically do not accept.
Good. I'm glad. I didn't think anything other than that, but yeah, it's actually sitting here right here. It's called Rebuilding the Front Porch of America.
Oh, wow.
And
who wrote that book?
Patrick Overton, Essays on the Art of Community Making. And it's a friend, another director on the podcast introduced it to me. And there's an essay in there about a director who decides to go and make, kind of like Molly Smith did with Perseverance, just going to go to a place and just start making theater. And, maybe they're professional actors. Maybe obviously there's a lot of amateurs or just people, and I'm just going to make theater. And the guy asked him, he said, well, did the quality of the production suffer? And he said, of course it suffered. It's not the same thing. But these people are telling the stories and they're seeing each other. Like, I'm watching my dentist give this beautiful monologue, just this beautiful rendition of their life. Of course, it's not the same as something I'm going to go watch at a main stage theater or Broadway, wherever, regional theater. But that's not the point. I'm not going to see that. I'm going to see them. I'm going to see what is being made that way. And I thought that was a beautiful thought of, and as you just articulated, like excellence means excellence wherever you're at. There's not a, you're on Broadway, you're excellent. You're anywhere else, you're not. And just because you're not a professional at it is, thank you for saying that out loud. So you've moved from grassroots organizations into leading major art institutions, as you said, Oregon Shakes, now Perelman Arts Center. What did you have to, or what are you continuing to protect as you scale up, and what have you had to let go?
It's interesting. When I made the decision to step away from Cornerstone, I stepped down after 20 years. And I knew then, and I could say without hesitation, that I knew I would never work for an organization with the purity of mission of Cornerstone Theater Company. And that was a choice, to walk away from what I thought would be my entire life's work. And so that was a decision, and it hurt my heart. And it still does. At the same time, I feel like my personal values and values that were instilled in me through Cornerstone's work have remained really active in the work that I've tried to do at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, at PAC NYC, as we call Perelman for short. And, wherever I've worked as a guest artist, I've tried to always bring those values with me. It's impossible to separate who I am now from my 20 years with Cornerstone, because they're so...
The foundation. It's the cornerstone, obviously.
The cornerstone of my career, and so completely tangled together in a beautiful way.
And this is difficult to ask just because you're in these institutions, but I also know that you're inside pushing. When institutions say they want community engagement, what do they usually get wrong about what they think that title means, community engagement?
I think both projects that I've been part of and projects that I've observed, I think sometimes larger institutions talk about community engagement, but they actually don't want to cede power in terms of decision making or change methodology, and pause and reprioritize decisions based on the collaborators' feedback. And I think that I have fallen into that trap, certainly, both as an artist and as an arts leader sometimes. And I've watched sometimes others fall into that trap quite disastrously.
What can we do about that? How do we set that up? How do we, knowing that, what do we build? What are the structures we can build for that to happen?
Well, I think the one thing that we can't do is throw up our hands and say, see, it doesn't work. We can't do it. It doesn't happen. X institution has, no business trying to collaborate with community or for community to, give up. I do think that collaboration between communities and arts institutions, I think that the upsides are worth the risks of the work. I really do. I remember Judy Baca, who runs Social and Public Art Resource Center, certainly did in the years that I was in LA, a Chicano mural making organization, a visual arts organization that's quite amazing. And I remember Judy had a really interesting mantra, which is that the community was responsible for the content of any work of art, and that the professional artist was responsible for the shaping. And she had that very interesting, clean distinction between content and form. I don't know that I think that applies in all situations. I'm not sure it applies in but there's something there, right?
There's something there.
Yeah, there's something about form versus content that I think is really, it resonates for me. It resonated for me when I heard it, and it still does.
Yeah, I'm letting that sit with me for a second because there's something there. I want to investigate that further. That's interesting.
We can talk about that in our next conversation. After it's percolated.
There you go, from your lips, as you said. You're putting things into the universe today, Bill. What's going to happen?
Following your lead, Adam. Following your lead.
When you enter into a room, I'm always fascinated by schools, institutions. They train an actor how to warm up to come into a room. There's so much time spent on that. And I don't know of anywhere that talks about what a director needs to do to walk into the room. There's no kind of preparation, training, warm up for a director to come in the room. Do you have a process before you come in of what you need to do to be that satellite dish for those actors, to be the sounding board, to be the perfect audience for that rehearsal? Because so many times I know we are fielding calls, conversations with designers, producers, got to do this, you're running, you maybe can get a sandwich in before you get into rehearsal. But that time period is a precious time period for us to kind of clear our heads. What is your process, or what are you working on? What do you know that you need before you can come into the room?
Very interesting topic. I would say that for years, I primarily leaned on the design process and the casting process or if I were directing a Shakespeare, for instance, at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, we almost always did custom cuttings of the plays. If there were multiple quarto and folio versions, really spending, weeks and weeks kind of combing through every comma, every difference to try to think what was best for this production of Hamlet, let's say. And so the text preparation, the design, especially scenic design, but also costume design, and the casting process usually not in that order, by the way, were always the primary way that I prepped. In 2009, my second season at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, I directed the world premiere of a play called Equivocation by Bill Kane. Bill Kane is a genius. I don't use the word lightly in terms of the number of geniuses that I've known in my life. And he was absolutely brutal with me about what he saw as my lack of preparation. And we would meet for 2, 3 hours every morning before rehearsal beginning that afternoon and that evening to prep. And it absolutely shifted my relationship to preparation for rehearsal. Because I've always been, since I was 22, 23, I've been an artistic director. I've had that day job, right? My day job is to lead an institution and to try to, help live the mission and the values of that institution, and raised money and dealt with all the HR issues that you deal with in leadership, and trying to give other artists opportunities. And I want to be very clear. I've also, part of the choice to be an artistic director for all these years, part of the privilege of being an artistic director, is that I've been able to do a lot of passion projects of my own as an artist, right? I've been able to hire myself to do things that I wanted to do. So it's been an extraordinary gift in my life. But it's also, I'm often like on the phone or on an email or in a meeting, like right up to the moment rehearsal starts. So it was right, and I'm sure you can relate to that, and many, many, many people listening can relate to that. So for Bill Kane to say you're not spending enough time preparing for rehearsal was very challenging for me to hear, because of my yes, but I have to blah 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 blah. But anyway, it did change things for me, and I would say that I spend more time and more energy and insist on my collaborators spending more time and more energy preparing for rehearsals. And a lot of it is just taking the time to talk through what's at stake in the rehearsal that day or the rehearsals that day, from something as basic as where are people entering and exiting the scene, to at least have a thought about that before jumping in. Um, uh, Trying to dig into what the themes of the material are. What are the challenges that these particular actors or one of these actors might be facing that we can help address? If it's a musical, trying to get choreographers and music director and the directing team aligned about what we're trying to achieve, because there's so many cooks in the kitchen, on a given moment in the show. So I would say the older I've gotten, um, the more prep has been important to me and essential to me. And of course, you need to throw it all away once you're actually in the room with the human beings. Of course, it's not like you're gonna. I mean, sometimes the thinking has been so solid and it aligns with the actor's impulses, and But just as often, the actors will take you in a completely different direction, or somebody else in the room who's observing and will say something takes you in a different direction. But the fact that you've thought through so many possibilities in advance just means you're better prepared. I mean, your word preparation is exactly right. You're better prepared to be an effective leader in the room, to listen better.
Yeah. And when rehearsal is over, what is the post rehearsal process for you as well? Are you one to let it go and you can go home and be human being, or does director brain continue on for a while? And do you need to take a walk afterwards? Like, what is we again, like an actor has a warm up, but we don't talk about a cool down. Is there a cool down process for you as well?
Well, just by force of habit, the cool down is often dealing with the emails of the day or,
Right. Yeah.
or the day job,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do like walking out of the room the moment the rehearsal ends always feels wrong. Some kind of processing, being able to thank people, um, Usually the last ones in the room are the stage management team and the directing team, and just being able to express gratitude, to hear what's on people's minds and hearts, and of course planning for the next day, just in terms of what the schedule is going to be. And are we sticking to what we had sketched earlier, or are we going in a completely different direction? So that's all part of the cool down process. And then, no, I think about it, a lot. I dream about it. I wake up thinking about it. So no, it's not a on-off button at all.
Mm. Are you the type of director that has many things in the fire at the same time? Or obviously you're thinking ahead. You've got plans. Being an artistic director, you have that. But are you solely in the thing that you're doing right now, or are you also taking meetings or other rehearsals for things? Can you split your focus in that way, or do you need to be solely dedicated to the thing at hand?
Well, they say multitasking is a myth and that it's
Yes, I
not
know.
possible.
Yeah.
But I would say that I'm a pretty extreme multitasker. And I'll be brushing my teeth, checking email, and peeing all at the same time, at the risk of sharing too much information. So I look. Let me say this: I referred to privilege earlier, and I'm so aware of how much privilege I've had in my life. So much privilege. I knew from when I was 18 years old to the pandemic starting in 2020, I never opened a play without knowing what I was directing next.
Oh,
And
wow.
sometimes multiple projects, sometimes just the next one. But I always, partly because I was an artistic director and we were planning what the next season would be and the season after that. And, or a show, I would be lucky and have a show that I had done at the theater I was working at be picked up and going somewhere else. And I knew, okay, then we're going to do that at Arena Stage, or we're going to do that at Berkeley Rep. So, incredible privilege and real joy that I always knew what was coming next, until the pandemic. And it was two things. It was the pandemic, which it was for all of us, but it was also that Pacanusi was under construction. So I went almost 5 years, well, over 4 years, let's say, between 4 and 5 years, not directing anything for the first time in my life since I was 18. From kind of my wrapping up my commitments at Oregon Shakespeare Festival. We did The Great Society, which was the second LBJ play at Lincoln Center just before the pandemic, that fall of 19. And then between that and Cat's Angelical Ball, I started to work on it. I did start to get to do workshops, but I wasn't in rehearsal for a production that was opening for almost 5 years. So I would say that, yes, I'm thinking about the next projects always, but I'm pretty obsessed on the current one. I hope I'm very present for the thing that I'm doing in that moment, and that's where my primary energy is. But yeah, inevitably, there's a design meeting, or there's some kind of deadline. There's a casting call that needs to be put out, whatever it is, and then you have to think about the project that's not the one you're working on. And that's a very happy burden, right?
Right.
It's a burden, but it's a joyful burden to have to think about more than one project at a time.
Hal Prince said that he always scheduled the next thing, the meeting for the next thing, the day after opening night, so that he never had a day off. And I feel that I was talking to my therapist this morning of saying I just closed a show this weekend, and for the first time, I don't know when the next show I'm going to direct is. Like I've had a pretty consistent 20-year period as well of saying, like, okay, I know the next one is 6 months away, 8 months away, but now I don't actually know, and that's scary and exhilarating at the same time to have that of going like, well, then anything is possible.
What's the show that you just closed out?
Oh Lord, Present Laughter, Noel Coward, which is not my typical fare. I had to step in for a director who had to step away for family reasons, and so I was brought into the process where all design choices had been made, the world building had been done, and then my least favorite part, staging, was all that was left. And so but to make that room feel um, comfortable is not the word. What am I looking for? Bring love into that room, because it was to lose a director, who had to go step away for family health reasons, and to not feel abandoned. That was what my focus was, which actually made the show better. Just having that love in the room. So, but yeah, I don't do comedies, and I definitely don't do period comedies at that. So that was
You just did, my friend. You just
yeah,
did.
I know. I don't want to prove that to the world, but I guess I did. I did it pretty well. I'm pretty happy with myself, and I never say that about my shows.
Congratulations. I have two things to say about that briefly. The book I'm currently reading, improbably, is a Noel Coward biography called Masquerade.
Really?
I
Wow.
read very little per day because I just read a little bit before I fall asleep at night. So I've been taking a long time going through it, but it's been fascinating. And the times in my life where I've directed more of like an assigned project, either because somebody else assigned me or because I assigned myself as an artistic director. Like, somebody's got to do this particular Shakespeare. I
Right.
guess it'll be me because I'm the
Yeah.
artistic director. There's an interesting freedom in either inheriting something or being assigning yourself to something that's not a passion project. That it's a different set of muscles to exercise. So
Yeah.
good on you for bringing love into that room, and I bet it was beautiful.
Like I said, I never say this about myself. I was really proud of the work because, as you said, like I never would have taken this job. I mean, I have said no to so many things because I'm not the right person. I can point to you. I can give you the name of the person who's the right person for this, and I never would have taken this on. And it was a real challenge, and I can do that. I don't know if I want to do that, but I now realize that I can do that, which is really quite fascinating. Um,
Congratulations.
Thank you. You talked about Cat's Jellicle Ball, and I do want to get into this, but you've also just raised something which I'd love to dig into as well. What do you think that you're not great at? What would you say? No, maybe that's not for me. You should, ask somebody else, and not in a way of like, oh, like I shouldn't direct that, for racial, gender reasons, whatever, sexual reasons. I'm just like that's not for me. That's somebody else's story to tell. But in terms of like what you recognize you're good at and what you recognize you're not so good at, or you're maybe even afraid of, like I said with the Noel Coward, like what would be something that you would say, "Ooh, I shouldn't do that," which now means that you should do it.
Yeah, I mean, really interesting. So when you started to ask the question, I was going to start answering what I think my Achilles heels are in a rehearsal process or in
Hmm.
making it go. So
Mhm.
I can address that if that's interesting.
Of
Um,
course.
in terms of like a genre, honestly, what my mind goes to immediately is things where I, as a cisgender white man of a certain age,
Mm.
feel like that's not my story to tell. But, Cast the Jellicle Ball should be at the top of that list for a cisgendered white man of a certain age. Um, so I don't know if there is I mean, it's given me so much joy to do all the new work I've done in my life, to do the musicals I've done, and to do plays that are, of different genres, different styles. So I think I don't instinctively. I think where my brain goes to is what are the traps that I fall into, and so is it okay if I answer that question
Please
instead?
do. No, that's a great question to
Um,
answer.
I would say that I can be too literal in my thinking, and I think that um, quest the quest for specificity is something that I hopefully bring to the table in a really useful way. But it can sometimes I can get stuck in an eddy of something that's too literal, or you know, uh, somebody said once to me, "Every table doesn't have to have four legs." And that saying has always stuck with me, because I do get in the mindset of it's a table, it has to have four legs. Um, uh, but that's why I love theater. It's why I love collaborating, because when somebody then challenges, I think you're being too literal. I think you're getting stuck on this particular possibility, and it doesn't have to be that. It could be something else. When I hear the truth in that, I go, oh, you're absolutely right. I can see it, and then I'm grateful. I do a little beating up on myself, like, oh, Bill, why did you have to think so literally? Why do you have to be so, but I do feel like I've developed over the years the ability to let go when my brain is stuck on a certain solution. Um, and I would say that it's 95% a good quality, but I'm very, very anal about time. Very, very. One of my favorite things to do is make a rehearsal schedule. When I have a new project that's coming, I love to look at how many days we have, how many weeks we have, and just begin to sketch how that work can be created in that amount of time. And so a little bit that can be a liability, right? In terms of getting to, my co-director, Jalen Livingston, the brilliant, brilliant, brilliant Jalen Livingston, had a much more fluid approach to time than I did on Cast the Jellicle Ball. And I would say that it was a great reason we co-directed, because I think the ways in which I would be uptight about time served us, and the ways in which he would be like, there's something more important right now than that thing that we planned, really served the process also. And it was the balance, that I think was part of the success of the process.
And you've just opened Cast Jellicle Ball. And congratulations on that. I can't wait to see it. I've not been able to get up to the city yet, but later this month I'll be there.
Please let me know what you think after you've seen it. I would love to hear.
I've been looking forward to this since was it done last year or the year before?
The summer of 24.
Yeah. I remember hearing about that and thinking, and I'll be completely honest with you, I'm not a musical theater person. There are certain musical theater pieces that I really, truly enjoy, the ones with a really strong book and a really strong story. And I always thought Cats was, as I'm sure you've heard from lots of people, Cats has a certain feeling to certain people. But when I heard this concept, I thought, well, yes, of course, it makes total sense. But of course, nobody thought of that before the moment that you thought of that. So I'm very much looking forward to it. What excited you about that idea when, as you said, probably in the pandemic, you were just starting to think about it? What excited you about it enough to then to say, like, we got to clear this with the estate, we got to clear out the long-standing idea in everybody's head of what this show is. I really want to push this community forward, and to be now here celebrated doing a beautiful production. What's excited you about this the entire time?
Thank you for calling it beautiful. Let's wait till you see it, and then we'll talk about what you really think. Yeah, look, I can't believe that we've talked as long as we have this morning, and my husband has not come up yet. My husband of what will soon be 42 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm aging myself in front of your eyes. We are college sweethearts.
Oh.
I thought that Cats came in my mind sometime in relation to the Queer Oklahoma that I directed at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, which was in 2018. Lori and Curly were two women, Ado, Andy, and Will were two men, and Ella is a trans woman in that production. And so I thought Cats kind of developed kind of alongside that, in the wake of that. And my husband said, no, you've talked about Cats in a queer context for 30 years. And I made the foolish mistake of thinking that he was wrong, although he's never wrong.
Right.
And a friend from LA, a director that I knew in LA, came to see it downtown and wrote me an email and said, I'm so happy that you were able to do this because, of course, you were talking to me about this 30 years ago.
Wow.
So, yes, one of the morals of the story is that my husband's always right. But the fact is I did think about it, and I thought about it in a queer context. I thought about Grisabella being an older gay man in a gay bar. And I just thought the way that the song Memory fetishizes youth and beauty and the kind of melancholy of a later point in life. I just thought that would be very moving. It's just the idea of it moved me as a gay man myself. And so that was really the seed. And then during the pandemic, interestingly, as we talk about institutions and our relationship to institutions, it was a board member at PAC NYC. I showed him the programming that I was thinking about for our inaugural season. And he said, well, it looks good, but I feel like you're missing two things. You're missing a show directed by Bill Rauch as our new artistic director, and you are missing a familiar title because audiences should just have at least one title they've heard of before. And I said, well, I do have an idea, but we will never get the rights. And then when I picked up the text and read the libretto, because I didn't know Cats that well, I had only seen it once. And I read the libretto and I realized it's not a bar, it's a ball. It is absolutely a ball, as in Paris is Burning, Pose, etc. Queer, black and brown, Harlem-based movement. That's what this is. It's very clear in the text. And I began to work with a brilliant gender consultant named Josie Kearns and a ballroom icon, a choreographer named Omari Wiles. And the three of us during the pandemic had weekly sessions on Zoom, and we just began to dream of it. So, there's then, of course, a long journey in terms of trying to get the rights from Andrew Lloyd Webber's team and Andrew himself, and Jalen entering the picture as co-director, and lots of twists and turns in the road.
What excited you throughout this entire process? And it's very clear, like it was subconsciously a seed for 30 plus years. So to finally push that through, it's amazing to.
We talked about Cornerstone earlier, and I will say that I had not really thought about the show as much in this context, but at opening night at PAC NYC, one of my oldest and dearest friends turned to me with tears in his eyes and said, it's the most Cornerstone thing you've made since Cornerstone. And I do feel that it's a very Cornerstone project. People from the ballroom community and musical theater artists trying to make something together, everybody's life experience and talents being recognized with equal respect. The fact that ballroom folks had an expertise in their community that had a weight, and that then the musical theater icons, including Andre de Shields, had a certain authority in terms of how theater works, and that somehow, not always easy, but creating a community of trust and mutual respect. So that's part of why it's given me so much joy, this project. So much joy.
I was going to say that from everything that I know about your work and where you started and what you talked about before of your personal why, it is full of community. It is full of inclusion. And it's, I can totally see how this, would be seen as an extension of a Cornerstone project. I mean, that embeddedness of that. From everybody that I've spoken to who has seen it, which again, I'll go up later this month, has said that there are plays where I'm going to go watch a play, and then there are plays wherein I'm going to be a part of a theatrical event. I am going to a night of the theater, and that everyone has said that has filled that thing of like, nobody wants to leave when they're there. Like the show is over, they just want to go out into the street and just party. Like the dance will continue on.
It's so beautiful to hear you say that. I have a very important question for you, Adam.
Yes.
If the show disappoints you and you don't have that experience, are you going to erase our podcast?
No, never.
Pretend that it never happened.
Never, never, never. No, I am the type of person that I will speak respectfully and openly with everybody about how I feel about a thing, because it's not. This is a difficulty I know that we have of like, I am not the artwork. I make the work of art. So there's a hard time of distancing ourselves from that thing. But I love theater, all theater. I'll give you an example. I hated the work of Richard Foreman, but I would go and see it every single time I was in the city. Every single time he had a show, I was there. And it bothered me to no end, just, the way that he was making work, how he was working with actors. But I also had the most amazing dreams every single night when I went to see one of his shows. I would lucid dream when he would do something. So I couldn't discount that he was on to something. It just wasn't my cup of tea. But I would tell all of my students, go see Richard Foreman's work. He's doing something that's insane and crazy, and I can't describe it. It's not my cup of tea, but I will always go and see it. So if I don't like it, which I don't think is going to be the case, I would speak as to why I don't like it. But I would recognize that so many people love it and it's necessary for them. But like I said, I don't think this is going to be the case. I think the cats that originated on Broadway, I would feel that way, but I feel like you've cracked something here. I love recontextualizing things and making them necessary to an audience today. Who are you making it for? Why are you doing it now? And I think that answers that question, whereas so many of these plays that don't get a revival, or like your Oklahoma or Daniel Fish's Oklahoma, that recontextualizes and says, why now? Why this story now? I don't like going to theater as a museum piece where it's just kind of stuck. And so coming into something like this that says, oh no, we've answered why now, why here, why these people. That's my raison d'etre. That's what I want to do with theater. So I would absolutely speak honestly to that. But like I said, I don't think that's going to be the case.
I love, by the way, I love that your whole framing about liking it may not be the issue. How is it a significant event? Is something happening in the room, whether you like it or not? And that's a beautiful framing. I just wanted to say very briefly that I talked about the idea of the bar becoming the ballroom. What I didn't talk about is Grisabella going from being an older gay man to being a trans woman. And that was a vital part of the process. And certainly Josie Kearns gets huge props for her crystal clarity that Grisabella was, of course, a trans woman. And, she was absolutely right. And, it's inconceivable to me now that Grisabella might never have been a trans woman. So I just wanted to say that for the record.
No, that's perfect. It's great. What do you hope the field has learned from your work? What do you hope? I mean, it's like turning a ship. It's never going to go in that direction. But what do you hope the needle has shifted to in your time in theater? Where do you hope it's going, or where do you hope to continue to push it?
Yeah, I feel like those are all different questions. I feel like I can't be presumptuous to talk about any influence that I've had.
Oh, come on now. You have to know. Maybe you don't want to speak about it. I understand.
I will say this. I do think that Cornerstone, over its 40 years, has been a really useful provocateur, but that's not the word I meant to use. But Cornerstone has provoked questions about who is an artist, what should be the foundation of a work of theater, and what is our responsibility to the most marginalized members of our communities and the most marginalized members of our society. And I think Cornerstone has been really useful in the field for that. And I'm really, really proud that I was the founding artistic director and that I was there to help pose those questions early on. I do think that, that my years at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, those 12 years, I'm grateful that I was part of a company that really dug in to questions of inclusion at that scale, that it was roughly a 75-year-old company when I started there. And for an organization at that scale in terms of its history, its longevity, its budget size, the number of artists, by many measures, the largest acting company in the country. for those years that I was there, that we were able to prioritize inclusion so successfully. The acting company when I arrived was 20% actors of color. By the time I left, it was 70% actors of color. And I do think that was useful in terms of an example for the field. And I'm really proud of all the new work we did. A Shakespeare Festival doing classic musicals as being an appropriate part of the canon, and the new work that we did that was inspired by kind of the spirit of Shakespeare's work in terms of civic engagement. Our U.S. history cycle. So I'm proud to have been part of all of that. And now at PAC NYC, for me, the great passion at PAC NYC is, if you think of my career as a 3-act play, if Act One was cornerstone and was about really identifying an audience and then kind of rigorously hand making a work of art for that audience. And then you use the battleship metaphor. If Oregon Shakespeare Festival was a giant, regional theater ship, it was about trying to turn that ship in some new directions, and a very audience-centered ship, historically and to this day. Then I feel like this kind of Act 3 at PAC NYC is, can we do work that is for very specific communities in terms of audience, that is on a scale of and with the artistic kind of rigor and you used the word professionalism earlier. I'll throw in professionalism. Can somehow what we tried to do at OSF and what we tried to do at Cornerstone be combined? And in this one of the most diverse cities in the world, can we bring people together at a place on the lower tip of Manhattan that was a trading place for indigenous communities, that the campus dares to call itself the World Trade Center? Can we bring people together in surprising combinations at that location on this island that has seen over 400 years of trauma and over 400 years of resilience? So I'm trying to be part of that dialogue right now, and in a way, it's related to everything I've ever tried to do, but it's a different form of it. How about
that? I see that too. No, I love that's great. I see that. I totally see that. I was sitting there thinking like, well, I hope it's not a 3-act play. I hope we're a Shakespeare 4 acts, 5 acts. But I also don't want you to think about leaving someplace already. But yes, we want a long and storied career for Bill Rauch.
Well, bless you. My suspicion is that this is Act 3 as an artistic director. I hope there's a chapter someday beyond being PAC NYC's artistic director. But meanwhile, I am very, very grateful to be there, and there's a lot of work we got to do there. So.
Ask 2 questions at the end of the podcast. This was given to me by one of my students in between class, and the subtlety of this it has stayed with me and really kind of rocked me. She asked, "What is a show that changed you as a human being, not as an artist?" Mm-hmm. But there was a Bill Rauch before you had this before you saw this show, and there was a Bill Rauch afterwards. There was something fundamentally shifted inside of you as human being, is your nature. Can you think of that production, or think of productions that have done that for you?
Well, 2 things came to my mind immediately. So in the spirit of colleagues and friends talking over a meal, as you framed this conversation, which I love, I will say the first thing I thought of was seeing the Worcester Group's LSD, just the high points. But when I was the summer, I think it was the summer before, I know it was the summer before my senior year of college. But honestly, that shaped me as an artist, because the lessons that I took away were, first of all, like extreme artistic risk taking was worth it. And that only a certain level of excellence could be achieved. Here I am using the excellence word now after saying but a certain level of precision of acting and direction could be best conceived through a company setting. That these people work together as an ensemble. And actually, I went back to Harvard where I was a student and I founded a theater company my last semester at school. And we didn't have auditions. I just invited people to work with me. And we did a whole bunch of work for that last semester. And that was completely inspired by LSD and the work of the Worcester Group. I would say personally, when you sharpened that question and I understood better what you meant, as a person, the first thing that came to mind was sitting with my parents as part of a church group, going to see a chorus line on Broadway, and having the gay character have that confessional monologue, and sitting with my mommy and my daddy at, I think I was 12 maybe, and knowing in some way that that was me, but that they must never ever know that was me. And I feel like right on through, getting me emotional today about this, right on through the queer joy that fills the Broadhurst Theater right now for Cathedral Ball. I feel like sitting with my parents in that production of A Chorus Line was part of that journey, was the beginning of that journey.
Got me emotional about that as well. It's beautiful.
Beautiful question, my friend.
Well, thank you, Emma Hart, for that question. Like I said, it's such a subtle question. You don't realize it until like, oh, that digs deep. When I actually have to think about what it means to be a human being watching a show and how it shifted something inside of me. Okay, well, last question, not so deep, hopefully. Who are directors that you think need more notice? Who do you wish that we knew more about? I mean, you mentioned your co-director Jalen, who I think is also brilliant. It's not about who is the best, because it's not about picking that. That's not. But like, who do you wish was getting more notice, more work, more attention to the work that they're doing? Basically who's exciting you right now?
I so appreciate that question, and I think I may not answer it in the way it's intended,
Okay.
because I feel a little bit, I'm a parent, and I feel a little bit like it's asking a parent who's your favorite kid. There's so many artists that I love and respect, and I think deserve more, just more notice. Absolutely. So many of the people I got to work with at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, so many of the people that I've been working with at PAC NYC. I will just say about Jalen that I try to learn from whoever I'm working with every day that I am lucky enough to collaborate with somebody. The concentration of learning that I did every day from Jalen Livingston it's just so undiluted and pure and intense. And the fact that we were of very different generations, he was 29 when we made Cats Angelical Ball the first time. Talking to you today, I'm 63. I think I was 61 then. And, not that we think age necessarily correlates to wisdom, but the amount of learning that I did from that artist, I cannot even put into words. So I will reinforce Shaylin. I'll throw out one more name too, just for fun. Although not somebody who needs a career boost in any way, shape, or form, but Che Yu. Che was writing a play for Cornerstone in Chinatown many years ago, and it was 1997, I believe. And I was supposed to be directing it, and I had to drop out because I had another Cornerstone project that conflicted, and Che said, will you give me a chance and let me direct it? And he directed it beautifully, And then he directed in my first and my last seasons at Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And then he directed Huang Ro and David Henry Huang's beautiful opera, An American Soldier, at PAC NYC. So that is an artist who has been throughout my career. And I will say probably my deepest answer is my husband, Chris, who is an astonishing director and an astonishing actor. And people who've experienced his work know how gifted he is. And I just want always more people in the world to know about Chris Moore as a director as well as an actor. So I did have some answers. Look at that.
There you did, exactly. And these are all people I'm going to try and have on the podcast as well. So these are great answers. I spent 10 years in Singapore, so I very much have been wanting to have Che-Yu on as well. To talk about.
He's so funny, and his wit is very caustic, and he's so smart, and rock on.
Bill, thank you so much for randomly taking an email and setting up with all of the help, being here today, jumping on this podcast and having this great conversation with me. Like I said before, you have been in my mind, and your work has been subtly influencing so many of the artists that I have worked with, and not so subtly influencing me. And I cannot thank you enough for being on here, and then saying that you'd come back on again at some point if I wanted to bring you back on again, and putting some things into the universe, and just being a really good human being, which then makes your work even better. So thank you for joining me today.
I can say with no exaggeration and total honesty that this is one of the richest and most meaningful conversations I've ever had with somebody that I was meeting for the first time. And what you do is beautiful. You're very, very good at it. I'm sure that's true of you as an artist as well. That I haven't experienced yet, but I feel like I have, actually. I feel like I've just been hanging out with a fellow artist and having a deep conversation. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
If this episode gave you any insight, inspiration, or even just made you smile, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts for more conversations like this. And if you're looking for guidance with a creative challenge or want to advance a dream of your own, we'd love to help. Visit boardofdirectors.world. The Board of Directors is a global constellation of theater directors dedicated to building community, sharing knowledge, and transforming the role of the director in the 21st century. We convene and curate a fellowship that fosters mentorship, artistic inquiry, and collective care, transcending borders and institutions and traditions. Until then, take care of yourself and take care of each other.